People are visual. You got to pierce the heart and then you move the mind. And to do that, it's emotion based.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, an investment fund and incubator for Republican campaign technology. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, we bring you into conversation with the entrepreneurs who build best-in-class political businesses, the funders who provide the capital, and the operatives who put it all together to win campaigns. Our guest today is Ryan Rodgers, president of the Strategy Group Company, a Columbus, Ohio-based political firm that specializes in media and advertising for political campaigns. They've worked for just about everybody. Ryan has a background in campaigns, of course, as well as an entrepreneur. In our conversation today, we discuss the importance of websites for campaigns, what works, and how campaigns can make better decisions about their online presence. Ryan, you recently won a READ Award for the website you built for Governor Glenn Youngkin's campaign. Let me just ask you, what do campaigns need from their website today?
Yeah, I think to start, and it makes a ton of sense, it's very obvious, but it just needs to be a modern design that stands out. You know, a lot of times when people are going through the whole website process to begin with, we sometimes think that the user experience or the expectation is any different than when they're going on a non-political or corporate site. So it just needs to be clean, easy to use, and clear in terms of what you're asking from them to do. So it's really process-oriented to start. It's a basic question. What's the goal? What do we want people to do? What's the expectation? What are we asking someone to do? If it's not clear what we're asking someone to do, then it can be confusing. You know, in that split second when the page loads, if you as a user, you're not clear on what exactly should I be doing? What should I be looking at? That first impression, that first interaction, what do you want people to see? What do you want people to know? You know, if that's not necessarily a smooth experience, or if there's friction, you're going to lose people. I mean, you don't get a ton of time anyways for people to browse the site. So it needs to be clear in terms of what do you want folks to do.
Yeah, I think across the board, that is from just digital marketing, digital campaigning, that just having that thought process, a little bit of it's not even empathy. It's just, what do you want to get from this interaction
Right.
is going to put you head and shoulders above your competition. But you touched on something of like clean and modern, which I think people, I hear that all the time when candidates say they want a website that's clean and modern. Does that mean sort of following the design trends of the day? Do you think it's possible to do like a timeless website, or is it always going to seem dated and you've got to redo it every 2 years?
I think, there's definitely an element that needs to be freshened up. 2 years is a long time in digital. As you know, it's 2 years, a lot happens, a lot changes. But in my opinion, I think the website needs to be refreshed every 6 months to a year. And not even necessarily big infrastructure changes, but I'm talking about content-wise, changing the picture, change the colors, freshen it up a little bit. I mean, a lot of folks that visit your website are repeat offenders. So, from our perspective, when people are going to the website, I'd like them to be engaged. I'd like it to be slightly different. And it doesn't need to be drastic, but change the color a little bit, reposition some of the photos, change the call to action. Minor tweaks just to keep it fresh from a design perspective. But when we're kind of talking about campaigns and candidates, everyone says modern, but that is a very different definition depending on who's asking. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times consultants and candidates, when they're asking for modern, they don't necessarily know what that means, to folks like us versus them. And for me, modern is don't overwhelm, kind of what we were talking about a little earlier, that human element, that empathy is extremely important. We tend to think, in politics, it's a different person, and it's really not. It's the same person that's browsing non-political and corporate websites. So that experience in terms of how you treat them, when you go to a website, instinctively, am I overwhelmed? Am I confused? It's no different than politics. A lot of times someone will say, I want a clean, modern, simple website. And then they throw a library of text and, copy for everyone to read. People are visual. You got to pierce the heart and then you move the mind. And to do that, it's emotion based. So what's the instant emotion when someone looks at the website that you want people to feel? And then you can move them to the funnel of, here's why I'm the best candidate. Here's my policy. Here's my positions. But it should be visual first. It's kind of the same practice that we take on the ad side. When we're designing creative and running video, the first ad is never policy, right? It's intro. It's here's why you should like me. That same approach should also be for the website. Most people, they're going to the website, maybe they haven't heard of the candidate. Make them fall in love with you first. Make them like you. And then you can persuade them. But then you can kind of move them through that funnel.
You offered a really key insight there that I just want to underline and highlight, which is your competition online is not the other Republicans you're running against in the primary or the Democrat you're running against in the general, but all of the other websites and things that people visit and have the ability to spend their time on, right? So it is important that campaigns understand the broader experience. It's not sufficient just to have a better website than your opponent, or a better website than what's down the ballot from you, but being competitive with those billion-dollar companies that are spending huge resources to optimize their websites.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, very rarely do I look at political websites as our competitors for what we should design the site around. I look at what are the corporations doing? What are the people that are spending millions and millions of dollars on this and that have the ability to do user experience and user interaction tests and studies? That's probably a good place to follow. Those are the best secrets to steal. It's what are people that actually have real budget, real time, which a lot of times we're not gifted with on the political side. So that's who we steal our ideas from. What are people with actual budgets, full blown out marketing departments doing for their website?
So on the other side of that, though, there are clear things that we need websites to do, but I also see a lot of candidates and campaigns fall into this trap of, I would say, overpaying for their website or over investing or trying to expect too much from their website. Even what are some of the things that candidates generally don't need from their website?
Yeah, that's a great question because even the expectation of how much websites cost, a lot of people still slap, I just want a basic 5-page site, and that should be between $3,000 and $4,000. The design time, and I'm talking about for top campaigns, folks that can invest, it's more than $3,000 or $4,000. The design time that goes into just thinking about the actual experience, and then what are the specific bells and whistles? To that point, a lot of campaigns, down ballot, local elections, state elections, they don't need all the bells and whistles, but they think they need to have them. So they think they need to have a governor quality website, and they're running for local city council, but they also have the expectation that it's a local city council cost. And so part of that is just explaining to the candidate, you don't need all these bells and whistles. If you want those bells and whistles, here's what it costs. But you're dealing with candidates that don't necessarily have huge budgets. I would never go to a campaign and say, spend $10K on a website, but they're only going to spend $3K on paid outreach, paid ads. It just doesn't make sense. So there needs to be some sort of formula in terms of how much should we invest in the website versus everything else.
Yeah. It is a balancing act because on one hand, it's the only part of your campaign that's working 24/7. And, we did a poll after 2020 that found that, something like 70% of undecided voters were going to Google. And hopefully they're finding your website on Google. And so your website's really, really important for persuading and getting people the information they need. On the other hand, you can sink a lot of money into something that isn't going to give you a return. And so it's a tough balancing act for campaigns. But I think the other thing that people need to consider in the cost goes to what we were talking about earlier, which is it needs to be refreshed. It is not a static document. That used to be the case where your campaign website was your online brochure. You had your issues, you had your bio, and that was that. But now the expectation is that it's being updated, that the calls to action are new. And so you need a platform that's flexible enough to grow with you if you're really serious about digital campaigning.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Even to that point, just in terms of freshening up the content, a lot of things, and this is a pain point on my end, when we have a campaign that invests a ton of money in TV quality production, but then the pictures we get for the website are pixelated
Right.
or they're outdated. It's like that consistency of branding. I think there's been a growth in the industry, which is positive, which I'm encouraged by, the expectation for consistent quality, consistent branding. And just to touch on Glenn in his last race, I think one of the big benefits of that team, the quality and caliber of everyone in that campaign from the agency vendor side, they understood the commitment and quality and expectation for consistent branding. So the website was never just, yeah, I don't know, just here, stick this piece of copy up there. Like the amount of quality content that we got, I understand that can't always happen, but having a commitment to quality production for the website, similar that you would have for TV, that expectation is positive, I think, and kind of improving across the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too, and I'm really excited about it because obviously they're the kind of marketing nerds like you and I and our listeners who really value the branding design and the photos, the videos, all of the stuff that goes into it. I've had a hard time, sort of justifying what is the return on investment for that. Why do we, there's certainly value to it. I'm not skeptical
Mm-hmm.
of that. It's how do you measure it? But can you elaborate? How are you seeing more campaigns shift in their approach to branding design and online assets, which, the website is ground zero for that?
Right. Yeah, it's a tough question. I'll be honest, and I think here's why. I think because the culture of it's very data driven. Anything digital, there's metrics, there's things you compare. So the ROI, when people ask, well, why should I invest in this website? And I always kind of come back to our point a little earlier. It's the human base. What's that first response reaction? And that's priceless. When someone sees their website, what's that intangible value cost? It's the human element. A lot of times that can be overlooked in digital because it's what are the metrics? What are the numbers? What's the data? The data, the data. But there's a huge element that I think us as an agency and for me, one of my priorities is like, what's the feeling behind this? And you can't always put an ROI to this. But when you take off your political consultant or your voter cap and you look at a website, like, how do you feel? Does this look like a candidate that is backed by the same things that he's saying on TV or that he gives in interviews? Like that kind of ROI isn't necessarily a tangible cost. It's more the human element of like the emotional branding, which is tough to put a dollar figure to.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like the silos are breaking down because when
Yes.
I started out doing digital for campaigns, it was very much like digital was over in a corner. You got whatever money was left over. You were getting the logo from the mail firm. Actually, they were the
Right.
ones designing it, and you were getting videos from the TV firm. And I think it's now sort of recognizing that the website and digital and online is the hub out of which everything else radiates. So I think it's less a being convinced that this is the way to do it, more we just want to be consistent and break down all those silos.
Yeah, absolutely.
For top performing campaigns like the Glenn Youngkin campaign, which he worked with Pool House. We had Will Ritter on an earlier episode.
Mm-hmm.
If listeners want to go back and listen to that, obviously, a really stellar team creating content on the ground. You've touched on a few times how photos, videos, on the ground content is so important to a successful web presence. What are the systems that need to be in place to produce that output? Because I think that's the hardest thing for campaigns to master.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely difficult. If you have the production, if you have that ability, if you have the content, the next piece, and again, this is not rocket science, it's the approval process. It's who's actually in charge that can give final sign off to have things approved in a quick manner. A lot of times, your website's pretty low down the priority list. A campaign, it's extremely complicated. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. Fighting for a general consultant's attention over, hey, can we switch out this photo for that? Low on the priority list. Someone should be able to give sign off if the agency doesn't have, the authority to just say, look, best practices, trust us. We have the campaign's best interest. We're just going to make this change. If you don't have that, there has to be a total a kind of like systemic approach to the campaign where they have that fast approval process, someone in charge to give sign off.
Why is that? Why are approvals processes so difficult? I've got a couple of different theories. And well, actually, why don't we just start with why is it so important that you move fast?
Yeah, it's I mean important to move fast because it's time based. I mean, if the elections just happen whenever, then we wouldn't be under the consistent crunch that we are. And usually, there's not a the reason why we're proposing content creative changes isn't just because we're bored. It's because we're seeing a decrease in performance, whether there's time spent on the site has dropped, or people are no longer scrolling past a specific point on the site. So rarely are we saying, "Hey, we need to make a switch," without something to back up the question that is then asked, which is why. So once you kind of get that past that piece, I mean, the second reason to have fast approvals because we can't kind of be losing people that are coming to the website. If we're seeing a drop, that's when we need to act fast. And usually that drop, it's not, it can sometimes happen gradual, but when you notice it, that's when we as the agency, part of our responsibility is to say, we need to make a change. And that change needs to happen pretty quick and not a week or in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's something that keeps coming up on the show, which is the one thing that campaigns can never get more of is time. And that's true for approvals processes as well. And I think, I really am a big believer in that speed kills, and the faster you can move, the better. I think that's, frankly, one of the reasons that the Trump campaign was so effective is that the approvals process, the trust within the organization from their digital marketers was just through the roof, and they could move and adapt.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it speaks to the culture of the campaign, right? So if you are afraid to approve something, I've seen this in organizations and campaigns where the approvals process actually just bloats because you want more people to kind of CYA, right? And
Right.
you don't want to be the one sticking your neck out, and that's indicative of a culture that is lacking in trust, that is lacking in sort of leadership or a clear message or direction. The best campaigns that I see are the ones where like everyone knows what they're doing, they know why they're there, and they're able to move quickly.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, you couldn't be more accurate. One of the things when we're onboarding and coming onto a campaign, first question I'll ask, who do I work with to get approvals? And just one person, because the worst thing is getting on an email chain with one person. And then every response, there's another person. And then very quickly, you're having 10 cooks in the kitchen chime in about a content decision that, frankly, us as the agency, when we propose this uh, decision or this route, we're 99% there. We just need someone to tick the box and say go. Very rarely when we're proposing or making a suggested change or edit, is it something that I'm not 100% confident in. So part of that is just getting buy-in from the campaign early. Okay, we'll trust you. It is us on the line at the end of the day. If something goes wrong from the campaign perspective, just one person needs to be in charge to kind of give those approvals.
Are you using any like software or tools to manage like the photos or the videos or all of this? Like I'm just curious about the tactical process there.
Yeah, so on kind of the software and the management side of it, we use Asana pretty heavily. I found that to be extremely helpful. One of the things that,
That's the project management software.
yep, correct. And I think one thing that does well, you can have outside collaborators come into a project. So if you wanted to grant access to someone on the campaign to a specific task or a specific project, you're able to have them come in just for that. It's helpful because it cuts down email traffic. You eliminate silos. You can have the campaign manager or whoever is the digital director involved in that process. I completely hate emails. The only time we really use emails as a company is externally. So anytime we can bring external campaigns into our process without overly confusing or complicating it, that's a win for me. And from what we found is Asana works very well for that.
Got it. And so let's just say you're getting photos from the field, and ideally they're uploading those into Asana and it's creating a task. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah. And we'll leverage like Google Docs as well. Just easy to have synced collaboration. I'm pretty anti email and Microsoft Word docs. If I don't have to download something, that's ideal.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Ryan Rodgers from the Strategy Group company. Ryan, what's your take on all of the bells and whistles that we're seeing on websites? So like, obviously any website you go to, not really political, you're getting like GDPR and you accept our cookies. That's the kind of the first assault, which is annoying. But then you've got the exit intent pop-ups that asks you if you want to allow notifications, can it use your location? Then you get a kind of a ding as the intercom chat pops up. I'm curious. My instinct is less is more. I like just being focused, but obviously there's something to it if people keep using it. I'm curious. Have you experimented with that? What are your thoughts there?
We have, yeah, and again to your point, all those dings are extremely distracting. Like when you take off your political consultant, yeah, okay, we want their data. Goal number one. But we don't want to ruin someone's experience in the first second. So we've done a couple tests, just on the conversion side for email acquisition. Do we get higher conversions pop up immediately when the page loads, or something like a timed conversion? And what we've seen is the timed conversion, setting like a timer, after 10, 15 seconds. Once someone's kind of engaged with the site or gone to a specific page and expressed a little bit more interest, then I think it's appropriate. It's aggressive if you just right off the bat, give me your email. I mean, that's just not how people react or respond, but we seem to think sometimes in the website world, we can just throw up a data capture right into their face immediately. I think there's something to be said for seeing what's the experience and how are people engaging. If someone's, kind of interacted with the website after 10, 15 seconds, there's a little bit safer an assumption there to say they're interested. So we've kind of seen a higher conversion rate with timed conversions, and even, exit forms after having a pop-up when they left, a specific policy page, having a timed conversion. Is this a policy that you're interested in? If they were browsing taxes, having that a specific tax conversion form pop up a couple seconds afterwards.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a trap that marketers can fall into, where they don't want to make the hard decisions about what to take away and what to put forward, so they just sort of load it all up. With when read, obviously we see tremendous success with those exit intent pop-ups, because
Right.
that's your last chance to get someone. But I think rightly to your point, if you overdo it, you miss out.
Yeah. I think the other, bell and whistle, just kind of thinking about it, um, chatbots and relatively newer technology as it comes to political campaigns. And a lot of the sites that we work on, there is an interest in an inquiry, but people oftentimes gravitate towards, well, just give me a shiny object.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of this coming back down to the fundamentals, which is why. And then the second part is, can you staff this properly? Because a chatbot needs to be managed and it needs to be attended to. You need to have some sort of internal structure on the campaign side to make it effective. Throwing a chatbot on a site just because someone else has it, it's never the right approach.
Right. I'm encouraging more and more campaigns that I advise to think about putting in place essentially a digital field rep. So someone who is responsible for that contact form, who is responsible for that live chat during certain hours, going into Facebook groups. But you're exactly right. If you don't want to put up these options for people to get in touch with you and then not respond to them, because
Right.
that actually creates more problems and more headaches for
Right.
you.
Which is something I think, Youngkin again did very well. In the primary in Virginia, there were a ton of questions just about voting process and am I registered? And the campaign was just getting inundated with calls. I mean, total waste of time, total distraction. So the goal was, okay, let's create a chatbot with kind of a decisioning tree for people to ask the questions that, steal the campaign's time and kind of bog down. Okay, we're getting these same questions over and over and over again. Let's create kind of custom logic to take people through that process. So if the campaign did get calls and people wanted to ask about the voting process or had questions around that, we were able to point them to the website. They're able to have a kind of a custom logic program built. They could ask their question, they could check their registration status, they could see where the polling location with, and then it was done and dusted. So elements like that definitely worked and made it easier and saved the campaign time. So that's just kind of one way that it did work, where it was successful.
What are some questions that campaigns need to be asking vendors about their website?
Yeah, so I think from our end, one of the main ones would be how often are backups generated. We're dealing with a lot with software. Inevitably, there's something can go wrong if you don't own the software. So at least making sure that there's backups generated if there's an outage, if Amazon Web Services just went down, do you have backups? Is there something that kind of redundancy? I think one of the other ones would be like if the campaign team can have a login to make simple changes. Part of that might go into why we work off of Webflow as opposed to WordPress. WordPress having long been the gorilla in the industry and probably website building as a whole, it's just not that intuitive. It's pretty difficult if you don't eat, sleep, and breathe. So one of the things that we found with campaigns that were always asking us, can you make this quick little change? Can you add a press release, swap something out? That's kind of a waste of their time, but it's also, frankly, respectfully, a waste of our time. Like that's not necessarily the value that we bring to the table is changing the text. So something like Webflow that pretty much we exclusively build our websites on, we're able to give the campaign a login. They can come and make minor changes. They don't have enough access to make anything significant or infrastructure or something that could take the website down. But that was, one pretty big decision that we've made that's cut one step in the process between campaign needing something done and our involvement.
I think another thing that campaigns need to be asking is, well, it's even more internal, right? Which is they are focused on getting something up for launch date. They're not thinking about, 6 months from now or after the primary or right before election. And so I really do encourage campaigns to just slow down, take some time to think about all the ways that your website's going to be used, all the people who are going to go visit, how it's going to change, and not box yourself in too heavily early on just because you're trying to hit a date for launch.
That's exactly right. I think the other thing to that point is just knowing how fast it would take the agency to deploy some of those changes. It seems like with the website, people are like, I need this immediately. I need this now. Having a clear understanding expectation from campaign and agency, how long does it take? What's the normal turnaround time? As much as possible when that's part of the whole onboarding process as well, it just helps with the whole expectations and makes the customer service and whole experience better for everyone involved.
Yeah. I was really excited when I heard that you were developing in Webflow. So I've started to move more of my sites to Webflow. I really like that platform. I've been a WordPress loyalist for over a decade. Really believed in kind of the open source nature. But over the years, it becomes so bloated. I think all of the additional plugins that you need to add into it just to get it to work the way you want it, and so always nervous when you're going to a proprietary system. Although Webflow kind of walks the line on that. What are some of the other software tools besides Webflow that you're using to design and build websites right now?
Yeah, so on the website side, because we're pretty much exclusively 100% made the switch to Webflow. On the design side, it's all Figma based. So we'll design in Figma, actually have the full front end mockup inside Figma. It kind of gets us out of the template box, or everything can be custom made and designed. So all of our team of designers don't necessarily need to be website designers. They can be just quality designers and think about the experience, and then have that design in something like Figma, which makes the execution as far as development moving into Webflow pretty seamless. So the process from design to then getting a website launched and developed is fairly quick, because of the nature of how Webflow is built anyways. So that's been a nice process from having design to development, the quickest part. And normally that could be one of the longest.
Yeah, Figma is another one of those platforms that I really recommend everyone start getting to know, because it is certainly taking over the industry. Ryan, is there a campaign tech startup that you'd like to see, maybe a challenge or problem that you come across regularly that you say, hey, that would be a really good product?
I think there's probably two, one of which, I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but I think, Rival has been nice, because when campaigns come to us and they ask for big, expensive, complicated websites, sometimes it's just not worth. You don't really need an agency for that. You just need to get something up quick that's not necessarily a Shopify or Wix or what have you, Squarespace, something easy to use like that. You need something a little bit more geared to politics. I think one of the other things that would be nice is just seeing more corporate-based tech shift into political specific. Something like Flutterflow, which is an app builder, something like that, specifically tailored for politics. I know there's kind of been less of an emphasis on apps, and people focusing on that. Part of why I think that could be is just because the cost, the time, the expense. If there was something maybe a little bit more easier, that might just be another touch point for folks to look at.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. And if listeners haven't heard of Rival, we've got an episode with Max, co-founder of that company, in the feed, not too far back from this episode. So go give that a listen. I want to thank Ryan for joining us today. There's a link to the Strategy Group Company's website in the show notes, and you can go see some of their recent work and learn more about Ryan there. Please remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show if this is your first time listening. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it right there. And as always, we ask that if this episode made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, please share it with a friend, and encourage them to give it a listen. And if you've been listening for a while, remember to review and rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts so other people can start learning about it as well. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.